Hi, I'm Jason with Worship Artistry, and in this video, we are going to be taking a look at ways for you to take your rhythm and acoustic playing to another level. I've taught so many guitar students over the years, and one of the things that often gets asked of me is, why is it that when I'm playing, it just sounds like chords, and when you're playing, it sounds like music? Now, I'm not trying to brag, but it's true. There actually are certain techniques that you can add to your playing that make a world of difference. So in this video, we're gonna look at 5 of them. So let's dive in. I cannot tell you how many players come to me for lessons and they've been playing for 10 years, but still can't even make a smooth chord change. You cannot be a good guitar player if you cannot change chords smoothly. And the truth is, it's not something very difficult, but a lot of times people are trying to change on the wrong beat. So let's see how to do it right. I'm gonna do a simple strum pattern here. We're just gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. 2, 3, 4, and. Now, if you looked closely, and if you heard, you can actually tell I'm lifting up on whatever the beat is before I'm supposed to land. So I'm actually lifting up all my fingers from the guitar neck on the 4 and, right? So that up strum, which sounds not great, right? If you're doing it really slowly. However, when you put it in the mix of how you're playing, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and it blends right in, all right? So this works for all your guitar chords. And yeah, there's things that you can do, you know, if you're playing a G to a C, maybe you don't lift up all your fingers because you've already got some planted. But as long as you make that change in the right spot, it'll be much easier to land. What I would suggest is just practicing a very simple pattern like that until it lands really smoothly. So let's try that. We can go with our G, just 1, 2, 3, 4, lift on that up strum, and then come down with your C chord, and then back. 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you can make that motion smooth, all right, because slow is smooth and smooth is fast, it'll land right in the pocket, it'll feel great, and your chords will sound awesome. Okay, so we got that easy one out of the way, but it is a non-negotiable. You have to be able to do that to sound good at all on the guitar, because if you're not playing in rhythm, you're not playing music, and that's the bottom line. Now we're gonna talk about dynamic. Here's the thing, not all strumming is created equal. Okay, if you're the kind of player who just wails away on the strings, and you can do different strum patterns and all that kind of thing, but if your dynamic is always the same, it is going to sound like you're just punching somebody in the face over and over again. And we don't want to do that to people. That seems kind of mean, right? So if you're playing like this, that might be okay for the bridge of a song, or you're going like really big into a chorus. But being able to play quietly and emphasize even certain parts within the same strum pattern can make a huge difference. So think about it this way. You as the acoustic player are like another drummer. All right, a drummer has a kick, they've got a snare, they've got hats, they've got cymbals. They have all these parts of the kit that help them create dynamic patterns. And we can do the same thing with our guitar. So instead of this, let's try something like this. Isn't that so much better? All I'm doing differently is just changing up the dynamics. I'm playing a little quietly, emphasizing that up strum, and it makes a world of difference. You could do that so many different ways. You can you can focus more on your lower strings and then hit all your strings. You can go from quiet to loud. A lot of different ways you can do it. Here's how I would suggest that you practice it. So let me take a strum pattern and just work on getting louder and quieter as you go, and treat it like you're like somebody's turning up the volume on something, right? Just kind of slowly turning up the volume knob and then slowly bringing it down. So you just sit and pick a chord and just do this. And do that until that becomes really natural. Now, if you're wondering where you should be emphasizing the beats and where you shouldn't be, let's talk about that in the next section. A lot of times people say, make sure that you play with the drums, right? Well, what does that even mean? I like to think about it as the kick and the snare. that those are the two things that you're focusing on. Our ears tend to hear where that snare drum is, and that's what kind of helps us bob our head, right? And here's the secret. 9 times out of 10, snare is on 2 and 4. And so if you think about playing louder where the snare is, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's gonna help you emphasize that groove. Now, what do we do with the rest of it? Well, if you think about where a kick drum lands, almost always lands on the 1. And if you think about a full band situation, bass players tend to try and lock in with the kick drum. If they're a good one, that's definitely what they do. All right, so when you're playing, if you think about your lower notes or your lower strings as like the bass, and then your more full and louder strings as the snare, well, now all of a sudden we got a drum beat. So that's what gives us that 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So smooth chord changes, we're dynamic, we're playing quiet, then we're playing loud, and we're doing it right along with the drum beat. Now, if you haven't been doing that, honestly, that could be a huge change to the way that you play. And you may just want to spend some time working on that. So feel free to try this section again, kind of go back, really try and lock in, try it along with some songs, maybe something that you already know, and feel that drum beat as you're playing. That will make a world of difference, not just to you, but everyone listening to you. All right, let's go on to the next one. When we talk about picking, we're talking about arpeggios. And that's just a simple way of saying picking out single notes in a chord. Now, when I first started playing, people would tell me, oh, just pick out some notes in that. Which ones? In what rhythm? Because just sitting there with a G chord and... I mean, that doesn't sound like a song, right? So how do we decide what notes to pick and in what rhythm to pick them? Well, if you've picked up on kind of what's been happening in this video so far, obviously the rhythm, the feel is a big part of it, right? So if you think about your strum pattern, let's say you were doing something like a... Right, you've got a strum pattern going. Just do the same thing, but pick out single notes instead. And the other big trick with this is to always start with the bass note. If you do those two things, it'll work. So for example, in that scenario, I'm alternating notes in the chord. I could go right in a row. I could bounce back to my lower string every time. All I'm doing is that same pattern, down, up, up, down, up. That's what I was strumming, so that's what I start picking, right? And that works with everything. The main thing is that you move to wherever your bass note is. So if you switch to a C chord, make sure that your bass note, which is your lowest note of the chord, is now on the A string. So. Likewise, if you go to a D chord, well now all of a sudden your D string is your lowest note. And you can use that concept with anything. The thing that I like about doing it that way is that because you're playing a chord and because you're playing in rhythm, if you catch some extra strings, it's not the end of the world, right? To do that. Same thing if you were doing a different strum pattern, right? Main thing is you play the bass note in the beginning, and then you keep a consistent rhythm with your strum hand and just kind of treat it like you're strumming, and you should be in good shape. Okay, now for my favorite one. I love to do this. One thing that I noticed whenever my students would bring in like acoustic guitar songs that they wanted to learn, they were typically kind of using this technique. It was something that stood out, made the song feel like it had a signature feel to it rather than just playing open chords. And so I love to use this technique whenever I can. And essentially the idea is that we're going to be picking out a chord, but we're going to just change the bass note a bunch. So we're gonna keep everything the same, but we're just gonna change the bass note, and it's gonna sound very cool. So for example, something like this. That sounds a lot cooler than. And the reason it sounds so cool is because I'm using that one voicing and just changing bass notes around it. So in that case, I was essentially making a C chord shape here, leaving that G open. That's a D chord, essentially. So you've got like your D, and then I've got my B minor there. Just going to the A, to the G. I can drop to my E minor if I want. I can walk up. And all I'm doing is just keeping a pattern going and then just changing that bass note. And that works in a number of places. Some of my favorite ones, really anytime that you can get down to an open string, that's helpful. So for example, I like to do it in B. I like to do it in E. That's one of my favorite ones. It's just kind of using that open E. And the thing that makes it sound so cool is it's just using that root chord as kind of the higher droning parts. Another great place to do it is you can play an E up here, because it allows you to get to that open A, which is nice, and the open E. And then you can just kind of play around with what you're doing on top. So if you know that you can get to your main bass notes, who knows what you'll come up with. But you can use that concept in pretty much any song, and it'll give it a totally different signature sound. So there's a few things that can make a world of difference in your playing, and you might notice they all have to do with rhythm, every single one of them. So we went over smooth chord changes, dynamic volume, locking in with your drums, rhythmic arpeggios, and then changing our bass notes around a single chord. And if I had to tell you which one of those mattered the most, which will make the biggest difference in your playing, it's gonna be locking in the drums. So thinking about that kick drum, thinking about the snare, and really trying to be that kind of player. If you'd like to dig in more, worshipartistry.com has over 600 song tutorials, all of them diving in to these kind of ideas, but just more in depth. I think you really enjoy it, and you can try it for free over there at worshipartistry.com. And if you don't feel like doing that, well, at least subscribe, ring the bell, jump in the comments, tell us what you thought, tell us what you'd like to learn more about. We'd love to hear from you.